We've got John Mackay all the way in Australia, who is joining us now. And bear in mind, it's about 4:30 in the morning, something like that, 5 o'clock in the morning. It's pretty early there. So we're very grateful to have John with us and come and share with us. As we were chatting with John, or as I was chatting with John over what we wanted to actually do this program, we've decided to really focus in on two new areas of sort of topics of research, if you like. The one which will be coming later on in this week on Friday will be mostly dealing with some new research and some new work that has gone into creation research with regards to the likes of the Aborigines in Australia. And some of the new discoveries, both in genetics as well as some of the new developments that have been going on, both in Jurassic Ark, which is our outdoor museum in Australia, as well as the new Brisbane Museum. You remember, some of you will have met Des and Linda, who were here earlier in the week, the two Australians, not the other Australian that we have here, which is, of course, Diane Eager, who will be speaking tomorrow. But Des and Linda actually help head up the project, the museum project in Brisbane. So, this is some brand new research. And then the other topic we decided to go on is some of the latest experiments that have been going on in creation research. A big emphasis on creation research is the research, new stuff with strata, new stuff with fossils, and some exciting new coal and oil experiments. So John is going to take us through really some of the great new research that has been going on at Jurassic Ark. So John, over to you to introduce things, and I will hide us from the screen once it's over to you.
Okay, Joe, can you put me on full screen for the moment? Or is this the best I get down in the bottom right-hand corner? That's better. Well, hello, folks, all the way from down under at 4:22 a.m. in the morning. And it's a wet day out here. I believe you've had a little bit of rain as well, but that's England. And I don't know, you can complain about it. It's always there when I go there. Okay, the topic we're going to deal with today, I go back to a story I've shared even in England many years ago, where a dear old lady at a Bible study, we were dealing with God created the heavens and the earth in just 6 days. I'm sure that's come up so far this week. Exodus chapter 20, verse 11, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the seas and everything that is in them. And when I'd finished quoting that, she said, how could you make the universe in just 6 days? It's such a big job. Now, naive, simple, wanted an answer to the question. And so we'll be dealing with issues like that, time, process, making, creating, etc. A few little object lessons that will come up. I just knocked my phone light over. Excuse me a moment while I put it back together. We have here one fossil buffalo bone. You can see it's millions of years old, and it's black. We have here one fossil fern. Can you see that nice fern there? There we are. Right. It's dark. It's in a grey shaly rock, and we have here another specimen from one of the sites you'll be seeing tonight. Can you see the fossil plant on the right-hand side? That if you turn it over, not only do you see my marker, but you'll actually see thin layers of black stuff. This is from one of the first coal sites in Queensland, and it's stacked with plants and it's stacked with thin strips of coal. Never made much money, but it was a private enterprise and they only needed to keep their own home fires burning. And of course, this one is a big layer of coal. Now, I've worked in England, I've worked all over the world, I've been to coal mines like you can't believe, and we're going to give a look at the origin of, well, what do they say? Coal took millions of years to form in the swamp. What do they say about fossils? They're so old because they took so long to form. And what do they say about oil? Well, they're worried about it at the moment because we're running out of these fuels. They can't be regenerated. Well, we're going to deal with all of those issues today, because my experience all around the globe tells me that they're all false statements. They're all based on the fellow called Charles Lyell, the present is the key to the past, tied in with Charles Darwin, and a worldly attitude that for science, you've got to leave God out. Science teacher's definition, as in the Science Teacher's Journal, science is any explanation without reference to God. Now, they don't push that in classrooms, but that's the hidden agenda. Today, we make no apologies. Creation research, we intend to give credit to the creator who said he made the universe in just 6 days. That is a big job, but how did he actually do it? Now, you can put me over onto slides, Joe, please. Now, let's see if this is working. Yes, it is. That's good. Now, that's my next subject, From Adam to Australia for Jesus' sake. But you'll see at the bottom of the screen, we have the website. And all you want to read on this, you can search latest experiments. Now, Joe. Okay, so let's go to Jurassic Ark, because the section on the outside of this fence is dedicated to research experiments. On the other side of the fence, it's dedicated to fossils and a living fossil garden from Genesis chapter 1, day 3 onwards. Okay, if you come to the outside section, there's Clem, one of our research helpers. Now, there's a display we set up to show people that coal actually can form quickly. Oil can form quickly. We have quite a few of these display boxes, and they represent the end result of vast amounts of time out in the field. Here's a group of science teachers from one high school in New South Wales. On that day, I found that fossil. Isn't that beautiful? A giant tassel fern type plant, giant equisetums in the rocks, and the equisetums are still here. Horsetail rushes. This went into our museum. So as Joe said, you met Des early this week. He looks after the building that he donated free of charge to us for our museum. It's coming on in leaps and bounds, but more of that later. We're going to deal first of all with coal. Okay, there's the first spot I'm going to take you. Bottom of Australia. There's Brisbane, where I am tonight. There's your lawn down the bottom right-hand side of Australia. There's the old brown coal mine. Many of these mines have been shut down now because of pollution and greenie complaints and things like that. But this is brown coal. You can see plenty of clay on the top, that white and red stuff. But if you get into the brown coal mine, you'll find it's full of timber. It sits on clay underneath. You can see it at the bottom. But in the brown coal itself, it's just like, well, look at that. It's just wood mush. In fact, you have to have special flame suppressors on your exhaust, because it's not just wood mush, it's wood alcohol. And it burns quite well, whether you intend it to blow up or not. That's why you guard your exhausts. What is this made of? Well, here's what you find. Silky oak trees, New Zealand red beech trees, silver beech trees, casuarina, banksia. Now, many of those don't mean a great deal to you, but they're non-conifers that are found there. And the New Zealand red beech and the silky oak and the silver beech don't grow in swamps. Why did I mention that? Because it's a common belief out there that stuff that grew in swamps builds up and makes coal deposits. Casuarina and banksia, well, they will grow alongside of swamps. They have a little bit of swamp tolerance, but the three at the top don't. Okay, there's one of the silky oak trees not far from Jurassic Ark. See how wet it is? See how swampy it is? They prefer to have their roots wet. Nope, they prefer to have their roots dry. They don't like the swamp. How long have we known this? This paper, by the way, was first produced in June 1927. The coal seams, the brown coal seams in Australia and New Zealand are full of Araucarian conifers. And Proteaceae. Well, you better look up those. They're pretty unique to Australia, except you have a few Araucarians growing down in the south of England, and now they grow them in Germany as well. But look what the comment says. 1927. Araucarians, the main part of this brown coal thing, are not bog plants. They must have been waterborne from some more or less distant site. Now, you go to New Zealand, you look at the brown coal there. Yes, I've done that. You look at the brown coal in Australia, and it's all been washed in. It sits on clay. The clay, of course, kept it nice and moist so it could ferment. There must be bacteria in there doing the decomposition. It sits on the clay, but there's no clay in the brown coal. Now, the reason for me telling you that will become a little more obvious. There are pine trees, Araucarian pine trees right down on the top of the coal. They have no roots, that they didn't grow there. Let's jump up to Brisbane. There's one of the places that I've taken many people. I've dug here for years and years and years. It's now off limits as an industrial site, and they've covered much of it up, so you can't access. I'm one of these guys who's old enough to have been accessible to Australia for much of the time before all these safety rules got introduced. But the importance of that is the coal sits below the boundary and the sandstone sits above the Jurassic-Triassic boundary. Jurassic Park, Jurassic Arc. Yes, these are names of layers in the rocks, but they're based on a place in Germany, the Jura Mountains. And Triassic simply means three colours. Now, as I travel around the world and dig up fossils in coal, here's one that I dug up on Highway 30 in Tennessee. Isn't that beautiful? Beautiful tree fern. There's a tree fern from Australia. By the way, that's in a limestone clay ball. We know what this is because they still grow just up the road. Here we are in Jurassic Arc. Beautiful, after their own kind. Some of you know that I've been pushing that line for a long time because Darwin and Attenborough lie. There is no evidence that tree ferns started out as moss and turned into big trees. They've always been their own kind. Easy to prove the Bible. But as I've investigated coal, I dug this one up at Jurassic Arc. Yes, we have a coal seam just under the toilet. We know that because we dug a septic pit out in the country. We run our own septic, but look at the coal. This coal is layered. It's high quality and low quality, and they all come from the same seam. In fact, we know where we are exactly in the geologic thinking because there was an old coal mine up at Tyro, just north of Jurassic Arc. When you have a look, this is Jurassic coal. Some of it's high grade and shiny, some of it's low grade. And clay turns out to be the key. I say that because I had a young PhD student who had real troubles. He said, I don't get the results that I should be getting. The professor keeps sending me back. And I said, what results do you get? He said, I've discovered that it doesn't matter how deep the coal is. It doesn't matter how old it is or how young it is. The quality of coal has nothing to do with the depth or the supposed age. We gave him a help and told him to investigate how much clay was in the coal. There's the first coal seam ever spotted in Australia by Matthew Flinders. Yes, I've been there, and it's a wonderful place. Big layers of shale, which is mostly clay, between layers of coal and lots of polystrate trees. See the tree there in the middle? Oh, there's John Mackay just down the road. Yes, that's a famous tree because I've given lectures on that all over the planet, and it keeps me mildly healthy in my middle to old age here, climbing around on all of these rocks. We took young Joe down to this site, and there's a vertical fossil pine tree. We know they're pine trees because the first guy to become the first lecturer in geology in Australia actually made a point of this. There's fossil pine trees here, but the fossils at the bottom, the pine trees are vertical, and at the bottom there's layers of leaves. See just below the sandstone shale there's black coal, great fossil leaves. And Sir Edgeworth David said there's no pine needles and there's no soil, but there's plenty of fossil leaves. Now, he reached the conclusion, and I totally agree with him. Sir Edgeworth David, 1858 to 1934, said Newcastle coal, yes, named after Newcastle in England, was washed in. They all show a directional trend from northwest to southeast, which makes me to England. Here's the first coal mine I ever got into in England. Sadly, all shut down now. The coal industry, well, as I said to the head of the mining board at that time when I lectured to the English Coal Board, you can't compete with our open cuts, which have coal seams up to 100 feet thick. That's the old Butterwell mine just north of Newcastle in England. And polystrate trees. You will see the trees on the right and left of the worker in the coal seam. Polystrate cross many strata, and there's all sorts of theories out there about how they formed. But what most people don't do is analyse what's in them. The coal is on the outside of the trees, and it's in layers. There is plenty of plants, fossils in the coal, but hard to see in the coal, much easier to find in the shale. And the shale is mostly clay. But the coal actually has a tiny percentage of clay in it. In fact, it turns out that that's a key as to why the plants and the trees carbonize wherever they're exposed to clay. So those big vertical trees are not carbonized inside because they weren't exposed to the clay on the outside. But if you go coal mining, you'll notice that you don't want to keep your cigarette alive because you could blow your face off the planet. Coal and methane are tied together. And oil? Well, we know there's connections between coal and oil here in Australia because we have one coal seam that if you don't bother digging it too often, it will generate oil. Carbonisation, turn it to coal. Methane, turn it to gas. Oil, all associated. So here's me giving a lecture to a group looking very serious. You'll notice what we've said on the sign there, making coal quickly. Clay makes the difference. You see, the essence here is not time. The essence is process, not time. That's the key. See our test samples there? Well, we've been doing this now for years. We first started with simple equipment. See the nice plastic container? They were on special down at Bunnings, I think, and we bought dozens of them. 4th, 7th, 17. I hate research sometimes because you've got to log all these dates and make sure it doesn't rub off. Oh, what's the difference? Well, I noticed that many of the fossils in the coal seams were fresh. So we did an experiment in which we did green leaves in clay and then brown leaves, decomposed leaves. Notice that the green leaves have produced black stuff. Are you wondering why it's all jumbled up? That's because John Mackay knocked it over. It used to be in nice black layers. Now it's jumbled up. But the brown coal is, well, it's not brown coal. It's just a brown mess. If there's no chlorophyll, there's no carbonisation. If there's no clay, it's brown coal, fermented wood. There's no carbonisation. But if there is no chlorophyll, then the leaves, the carbon in the leaves does not actually turn coaly. Did you get taught that at high school or university? No, neither did I. You see, there's our close-up. You'll see the black bits. This experiment has continued now for years. When you have a look at the results of it, of the continuation, look at that. Now, isn't that beautiful? I tell you what, one of the things we've learned about the coal and the clay and the role of these things, and particularly the green, by March 2019, we discovered that clay is really good for chemical separation too. It's actually good for breaking up everything that's in the plant. If you don't have green plants, then the carbonisation is pathetic. If you have no clay, there's no carbonisation. So I told the young guy who was doing his PhD with the Newcastle Coal Board, I said, don't worry about your professor not liking your conclusion that it's got nothing to do with depth. Go and do an analysis of the percentage of clays, particularly kaolin clay, and you'll find that the higher quality ones have a very evenly spread percentage of kaolin clay. That's what tends to do it. So, since we find mostly ferns in coal seams and in the fossils alongside, let's run some experiments here. Simple experiments. No, we don't worry about sterilising it because you see, if you believe in Noah's flood, almost nothing would have been sterile in the experiments. We have clay. The rocks would have been busted up and the rocks would have been, well, washed around and round and round during Noah's flood, pulverised. Here's a nice fern, green and fresh in spring. There's one of our ferns, herringbone ferns. 24th to the 1st, 2020. Yeah, it's painful having to record all this stuff and then keep your photographic records. I just checked my phone before and I've got 40,000 pictures of our research. Yep, praise the Lord for indexing, eh? And there it is, day one. We wrapped it up, we vacuum packed it, and it's sitting on clay, wet clay. There it is, 14 days later. Can you see what's happening? It's now going black. In fact, by the time you get close up, you can see some of the leaves are still green, but it doesn't take too much longer because when you get up to almost a month, I'm looking at a batch of fossil carbonized leaves. In fact, there we are 50 plus days later, and there's a fresh green plant on the front. That's what it was made of. And there is the specimen at the back. The clay it sits on is kaolin, just pottery clay. The bag is vacuum packed. That's simply to get everything close up and push the fossils onto the clay. But we use anything to mix up the clay, such as dam water or anything like that. There is no point in sterilizing these experiments. We tried that, and the results don't really go that well. When you leave it as unsterilized but vacuum packed, I'll tell you what, look at that. They just look like fossils you find in the field. Okay, here's Daryl. That's our curator. Pray for him. He's got to put up with people like me who insist on doing the experiments this way and not that way and filing the results. There's a fresh green leaf against the background of the fossil. What else can we find? If you actually pack up these fossils without clay, you can track. Yes, we do all of this because we've got to cross-test and cross-reference and prove that it's the clay. There we have the fossil, the herringbone specimen packed with simply just a vacuum packer. There we are. You get closer. By the time you get closer, 1 year later, it's just dull, dirty. It's hardly even green. And by the time you get to 3 years, do you see it hasn't gone black? Oh, the ones on the right-hand side have gone black. They're sitting on clay. The ones on the left-hand side just turn into, well, they look like dried out, dead herringbone ferns, which is exactly what they are. We also find some interesting specimens. There's a specimen in my collection, and it intrigued me because only certain parts of it are carbonized. See that carbon? That looks like I drew the outline in, and no, I didn't. That was how we actually found it. And surprise, surprise, we've been able to duplicate so many of these examples. Look at that. Leather fern at 2 months. Leather fern, by the way, is very popular with florists because it lasts so long. But do you notice this one only carbonizes around the edge? Haven't quite figured out why, but it's beautiful. I mean, you could almost accuse me of outlining that in black ink, but I didn't. That's exactly what happens after 2 months. It coalifies, particularly around where the reproductive organs are on the leaf. What's the fastest results we've got? Well, in keeping all these years and years of experiments, we can carbonize a fossil plant, turn it into coaly looking in 2 weeks. That's the fastest. Some of the plants take up to 18 months. And we've got a few clues as to what might be causing this. You see, clay type is key. Kaolin works best. Other clays work, we've tried them, but kaolin works best. The quality of the clay, pure kaolin clay, crushed up, disseminated, is what you find in the actual coal seams. The quantity, microscopic exposure in coal. Ferns certainly seem to do fastest, and the presence of the green chlorophyll is vital, which would imply, of course, that in the fossil record, the plants were all fossilized in a climate that was just like spring. You know, where God tells Noah after the flood he's going to have summer and winter, cold and heat. They come from a time where it doesn't seem to have been summery and wintry. The climate was much better. You take brown plants, no carbonization. They're the ones that have lost their chlorophyll. So when was the flood? And what was the flood world like? Well, the answer is the flood didn't take a huge amount of time to bury anything. And most of the ferns we can prove, talk to Joe as you go on your field trips about rapid fossilization. And the world that was buried in Noah's day was good, tinged by sin, but in beautiful environment weather right up till the time of after the flood. Some of the results of rapid burialization. There's one of my fossils from down near the Newcastle area, just outside of Gosford. Do you notice the fossil plant shows up still? The plant's still there. Look at that. Preservation is beautiful. It did not experience any disintegration at all, and the chlorophyll in it is converted to black carbon. See the plant on the top left-hand side? It's the same plant on the bottom right-hand side, but can you see me lifting up the leaf, the carbonized leaf? This is not a rare experience. This is much more common than people think. And this one is our fern. Notice it's carbonized. Even the stem, the green stem, is carbonized. Notice on the right-hand side, we can lift the leaves off. In fact, look, The actual leaf is still there, but it's carbonized, and it's the clay that's responsible. Okay, flood fossil plants, I'll be dogmatic. If they're well preserved and they're coalified, they were green. They came from a mild climate. They certainly seem to be in a spring growth. In our logic, there was no spring before Noah's flood, so it would have been fresh growth all year, no matter when the flood came. And the ones that are well preserved, that you can pick them out today, rapid burial beyond a shadow of a doubt. Now, this one's sort of mildly funny because when we did this, Daryl said, let's burn it and see what it does. So we took our plants and we burnt them. And he and I, who both grew up with steam trains and old coal burners, said, boy, that's coal. It smells like coal. So we sent a paper around, and some of the academics wrote back and said, you can't just say it's coal because it smells like coal. Now, I don't know about you. Most people haven't smelt coal today, particularly the younger professors. And so I sent to one of my biology professors who deals with all this biochemistry stuff. And I said, what would a good test for coal be? And he said, take it, burn it. If it smells like coal, it's coal. Nothing else on the planet smells like coal. Pure test number one passed. But the reality is, the point that Joe and the others are making is the issue. Well, to the world, you need millions of years to make coal. To the world, you need vast quantities of time and stuff to make gas. To the world, you need vast burial grounds to produce oil. However, you can short circuit all of this by having the right process. Now, that's a key we make to students. Listen, come to Jurassic Ark and learn that you need a better process if you want to save time. Save time, you save money. Save money, a boss will employ you at any time. This is key to industry, key to getting a job, key to thinking. Now, don't forget, tomorrow, when I come back next time, we'll be dealing with that. But if you want these results and seeing them filed over the years, go to creationresearch.net, then click Latest Experiments. You're having question time at the end of this, Joe tells me. Let's deal with some gas. Yes, we all suffer from it, and usually it's got a methane component as well, as some students at stupid parties will light themselves up. Here we are back again. We have lots of these cupboards, and we store gas and coal and oil in them. Well, there we are on day one. We've just filed the bit of flesh in here. Yes, we do these experiments with flesh and with plants, and you name it. Within a short time, look what's happening. No, it doesn't take weeks and weeks and weeks. This will happen almost as you watch. Look at that. The bag is swollen. In fact, by the time you end up in a couple of days, well, here's what we've noticed. If you use a flesh, like a dead fish, it will swell up, and it's very smelly if you puncture the bag. If you use plants, the end result is methane. We've tried all sorts of combinations of these. We must have kept the fishmongers in good stead. We've tried cutting up fish, cutting up meat, cutting up plants, putting them all in. We've even tried grasses, and the end result is the same. If you start with green plants, then you end up with bags of methane gas. If you start with fish and some of the others, you end up with a burnable gas, but boy, does it stink. The experiments here, let's take one deliberately. Here's Daryl. You see the sweat in his shirt. We do grow sugarcane at Jurassic Ark, and we thought, well, we're trying to find a way to industrialize on a cheap scale the manufacture of methane, because it's supposed to be, well, you don't want to use these gases. They're bad for the environment. So there's our sugarcane, and we chopped up the stems and the leaves. Sugarcane stalk, well, a little bit of gas, not much. Sugarcane stalk, I'm afraid sugarcane stalk produced some gas, and it was methane, but not too impressive. When you actually take the sugarcane leaves, man, does the gas pop out. The leaves are green, by the way, the stem isn't. Yeah, we've done hundreds of experiments like this. Notice we've filed the evidence. Some bags work well. What were we doing? Testing what percentage of clay you need. How many grams of clay to how many mils of water, to how much fern at all. And the end result, That's the one that gives us best 20 grams of clay in 100 mils of water and 20 grams of fern. Wow, that's not much. In fact, by the time you get a bag full of this, you can run a test. Yes, tables and tables and tables of tests. Yeah, it drives us mad sometimes. But here's what we did. We had a group of homeschoolers through one day and we asked them, did they want to see the evidence it was methane? So we actually put a can in a bowl of water to prevent a bit of safety explosion control there. And then we punctured the gas bag in the can and got our lighter out. Look at that lovely flame. In fact, it turns out we made pure methane with no smell whatsoever. It was exciting. In fact, we even had one where it came out so fast, it made these little methane bliss bombs, I guess. They're rather beautiful. I've never seen methane bubble out and the bubbles catch fire before. Rather spectacular. In fact, the colour of the flame here tells you how hot it is. Talk to Joe and the others about what red hot and white hot and blue hot actually means. The colours are indicative of how much heat you're getting out. Look at that. I tell you what, this went on for quite a while as we demonstrated we had made methane and nobody smelt anything. So methane is not a usable upper gas. It's out there in the environment and we run out of it there. You can actually make it from waste plants. What have we done? Well, we've gone technical. And for those of you who support our work, thank you. We do spend quite a lot of money on this research. Our research is never cheap. And look at the, well, what is that? That's our micro gas plant. We start by pumping pureed plant in one end and through several processes there. And we've got well, some of you are old enough to remember those old World War II gas tank era where the gas would rise the top of the tank up and water would keep it from leaking out. That's what we've made on a small scale. There's the gas bubbling up. I'll tell you what, this is a good free source of gas and it keeps going. We've had a few problems, by the way, and new technology always does. It certainly pumps out enough methane and you can get wonderfully exploding balloons. Why do I say exploding balloons? Because the explosion point with methane is 14 to 1. You only need 1 bit of oxygen to 14 bits of methane, and that's enough to blow it up. So be careful. And for those of you who want to donate to this, yes, we do need your support. There's Jurassic Ark. It looks pretty. At the moment, we're struggling with that machine because it works for a day or so. Then the byproducts of the plants and the gas clog up the tubes, and we haven't managed to find a way to solve that without adding highly expensive engines or motivators, which is what we're trying to avoid. We want this as a process to happen all by itself. All right. Now, they tell me I've got 15 minutes to talk, so I'll probably do one more and then we'll 50 minutes rather, then we'll throw it open to questions. Check latest experiments on creationresearch.net. And don't forget, my next talk will do with Aborigines and the evidence they came from the Tower of Babel. How about oil? Well, this is the smelly side of our experiment. Note the dates, 29th of 1st, 20, January 2020. We packed fish and other things, and we are trying to determine whether it comes just from the dead fishes or do we have to blend all the fishes up and turn them into a pureed clay paste. February 2020, this is 1 month later. Sorry about the screen being upside down. I should have turned it around. But you see the black stuff that's generated around the flesh, except in the bag on the left-hand side. The bag on the left-hand side is prawns without clay. The other bags have prawns with clay. By the time you get up to February 2020, a little bit later, notice the prawns on the right-hand side. Notice the prawns on the left-hand side. The prawns on the left-hand side have got clay. The prawns on the right-hand side have no clay, and they are actually just being preserved in the bag. No clay at all. Everything else, except for the one without clay, doesn't turn into oil. John Mackay's observation, the clay is essential for carbonizing the plants. You can take coal, as Hitler and the others discovered in World War II, and convert it to oil. The clay is part of that process. Microscopic amounts of clay. No clay, You can have all the prawns you like and you won't get any oil. Look at that glorious black stuff, June 2020. By the time you get up to, well, that photograph was taken not long ago. The prawns are still there. The prawns on the right-hand side are actually all gone to gooey, ooey stuff. The prawns on the left-hand side, which have been there 2 years longer, are still just preserved, dried prawns, no oil whatsoever. And the little test tube, take a bit closer. Yes, research is expensive. There's some of the residue coming off the prawns, the black stuff. And we've simply, well, we do heaps of experiments. And to do this one, we wanted to separate the oil and the clay and prove that it actually was oil. Smelly stuff to start with. But we actually got a centrifuge and we had it up to 20,000 revs a minute. And to be honest, we have not yet been able to separate the oil into a single layer. So any of you might have suggestions to how to separate oil from clay, go right ahead. But as I pointed out to the folks at Jurassic Ark, don't be surprised about this. If we have an oil spill at sea, the first thing we do is drop clay onto it, because the clay binds so strongly with oil, it will take it right to the bottom and take it out of the ecosystem. Of course, what's interesting, if you want to use fracking in the coal shale seams or the oil shale seams, you'll find that you can smash the shale to pieces and a hugely high temperature steam will extract the coal from the clay, or the oil rather, from the clay. We're trying to avoid that. So whatever answer you send to us has to be a low temperature one, because we want this to be able to be done at Jurassic Ark. Yes, we have hundreds and hundreds of tests. So when people say, oh, you creationists don't do any research, creation research stands as evidence against that. When David Attenborough says, you know, the evolution shows as a fact Darwin was right, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Because in all of these things, whether it's fossils, whether it's oil, or whether it's coal, the key is not the time. The key is the right process. So when someone says to you, how could God make the world in just 6 days? The answer is simple. He didn't need the 6 days even. He didn't need the time. He had the right process. So tomorrow, as I get ready for my talk over here, and we discuss the various types of Aborigines, from the miniature ones on the right-hand side, the pygmies, right through to the dark black ones that look like Indians, to the ones in the middle that look Asian, we'll be talking about from Adam to Australia for Jesus' sake. And you can catch all of these experiments again. A reminder, search the latest experiments. Now it's time for you to ask some questions on what we've done. And I hope that came through clearly. This is our first experiment on long distance lecturing in a tent.
That was good. That came through perfectly well. So that's fantastic. Does anybody have any questions then for John? Lots of questions. Here we go.
Not a question, an idea about how to separate the oil from the clay.
Go ahead.
Have you tried putting it in water and using a sieve?
Yes. The sieve idea is one of the first things we tried, but the clay is so microscopic, it goes through any hole in any sieve you want to name. And if you put it in water, the difference is clay is a series of little flat chemicals, and the surface exposure on every crystal really of clay, or every particle of clay, is so great that the oil binds to the clay far stronger than it binds to water, unless your water is really high energy and it busts up the structure of the clay, as in shale, and we could frack it. But that's the thing we're trying to avoid, because we're trying to produce low energy systems where we don't have to fork out a huge amount. And people say you're damaging the environment, or you're adding heat to climate change, and all those sort of things. Good suggestion. Thank you.
Any more questions?
So can you just take any clay and any Ziploc bag and any plants and put it all together and make sure that it's airlocked, and then after a while does it turn to stone basically, or get preserved?
Turn to carbon. So far, we discovered that because out there in the world that God made and the world that God destroyed, the commonest clay is kaolin. Particularly if you go to coal mines, you'll often see layers of white clay through it. Whether you go to the big dirty mine in Washington where the clay is so it squeezes out because of all the earthquakes, or you go to the mines I took you in England, you'll find layers of clay, and Joe can testify to that, underneath the coal. But the thing that people miss is the clay has to be microscopically fine. So you don't want an overwhelming percentage, but you actually you get best results with kaolin. There are other clays derived from bentonites and things like that which you can use, but the results are less impressive than what you get with kaolin. Now, one of our supporters who's now retired used clay in his chemical processes of making synthetic oils, right? For fragrances and things like that. So kaolin is definitely the commercial industrial best. Try the other ones if you like. We've tried them with homeschoolers where they bought a bunch of red clay in and put their plants in it. It will work, just not as effectively.
Very good question, by the way. Yes.
Another suggestion for separating the clay from the oil. Have you tried putting it on some kind of plastic? Because some kinds of plastic leak water through. I'm not sure if it would work with the oil, but it may be worth trying.
Mm-hmm. The biggest issue we're facing is the molecular adhesion, the strength with which the oil and the oil and the clay actually bind is incredibly strong. Right now, what we have to use is something that will break that. Now, the sheet of plastic certainly will let the water through. So when you look at our bags of gas and things like that, eventually they will deflate, because methane is such a small molecule that can leak through the plastic bag. I'm sure some of you have noticed if you buy bulk quantities of soft drink, aerated water and things like that, if you leave it in your storage container for a couple of years, you'll open it up and it's got no gas left in it. That's because as solid as the plastic bottle looks, it's full of holes that are small enough to let the gas out. So you can't keep the gas in. But if you use oil, which is a long chain structure, you've heard of methane, which is a small one. By the time you get up to pentane, the sort of things you're putting in your car, and octane, they are bigger molecules, and the adhesion to the surface of the clay is so strong, a sheet of plastic won't let the both out at the same time, or won't even differentially let one out. But thank you for the suggestion.
Any more questions, John? Yes, up the back.
So do you understand how it works? What does the coal do to the plant in order to cause carbonization? What does the clay do to the plant?
Okay, well, from all of the people who use clay in industrial processes, what we are looking at is an affinity between carbon and the clay. Now, in the field out there, I learned long ago that if you're looking for gold, you need to look for what's associated with it on a bigger scale. So one of my friends told me, hey, John, come we'll go gold digging, where we won't look for gold for stars. What we'll look for is carbon, because where you find a mass of carbon, you usually find gold associated with it. And I said, why? He said, I don't know, but that correlation exists. And the carbon was coming from fossils and the gold was coming in later on. And that correlation certainly did exist. As to what the clay is doing, it's certainly, all right, how do I, if you take a substance and you burn it, then a process called oxidation is happening, because the carbon would much rather bind with the oxygen than with what else is in the bit of wood you've set a fire to. So you're looking at a substance which doesn't choose, it's got no brains, but it's more chemically affiniated to the coal, to the oil and the clay than it is to the stuff it came from. So what it seems to do is chemically attract one part of the plant, which has got the chlorophyll in it, breaks it up into the black stuff, which is carbon, the green stuff, which is chlorophyll, and then the black stuff becomes carbon or methane, and you get all those byproducts. So it's a chemical competition. That's probably the easiest way I could talk about it. In fact, if you look up redox reactions and things like that in your chemistry textbooks, where we put things together in the hope that one will be stronger more strongly bind to the substance than the other, and it will swap places, right? That's how chemistry works. And if you can master the art of getting the right elements together, then you actually can produce new processes. But again, the point I want to make is when people bring up the issue of coal takes millions of years, no, it doesn't. Coal takes a process. If you have the right process, you don't need the wrong time. The evolutionist talks about millions of years because he hasn't got a clue about how coal or oil function. He doesn't do his homework chemically. And he then says, well, God couldn't have made the world in just 6 days. God didn't even need those 6 days. We know that because the next time he's going to make the new heavens and new earth just in a word. And I'm looking forward to being there because his word is true from the beginning. So thank you for the thought. Redox reactions, the affinity of clay to the carbon versus the rest of the stuff which doesn't come across. Next one, Joe.
Great stuff. Any more questions for John? Sure, yeah.
So have you thought of applications for this? Is this the solution to all of our running out of fossil fuel problems? Or have you thought of any other applications for it? Or is it just to investigate how coal forms?
No, it does have practical long-term aims. So I said to a coal conference where I lectured on that brown coal, I said we could turn this brown coal into high-grade coal by simply taking a quantity of the brown coal, which is just fermented wood, and using that as a heat source to drive a machine which pulverized the rest of the coal and added microscopic quantities of clay to it. That will convert the low-grade brown coal into high clay, into high carbon content. Now, nobody's been interested in doing that because obviously the cost of an industrial process like that, even though it's true, would actually cost the earth to start with. We've had people from the mines department come and look at what we're doing. We've had greenies come and look at what we're doing, and they're all impressed that we're doing it, and they're all astounded that it doesn't take vast amounts of time. But the greenies, we've been actually disappointed because those people who want a green environment, the last thing they want is our experiments. Why? Because they're in love with millions of years and no God. That's really what's behind the green environmental safety movement. It's behind most thinking in oil geology and that. So yes, there is a plan. There is, you saw that industrial machine that we built, cost us several $1,000s. That is industry's aim, but our aim is to provide a low energy source, not a high energy one, not like fracking. Fracking provides the, gets the oil separated, but it's a high cost, high industry, and quite a destructive process, really, as far as farmers and that are concerned. So yes, thank you for your suggestion. We are aiming that, and some of the industry people have been really impressed. So to get it from where we are to an industrial type process that doesn't use vast quantities of energies, that's our next hurdle. You want to join us, then Joe will tell you where to send your donations.
Thank you. My understanding of clay is a description of its size, effectively, but what's the underlying chemistry which works and potentially the chemistry which doesn't work?
Okay, the chemistry which is working is simply that of attraction. So that because the clay is flat sheets, they have, you've probably played with kaolin and clay if you ever did pottery. And what's interesting is as a low temperature, environmental temperature, room temperature, it's a very pliable stuff. But we know that one reason it's pliable is the sheets of clay slide over one another. There is not much adhesion sideways from clay to clay. And so you can shape it into a pot. Then when you heat it up, what happens is the heat actually gets into the clay and changes the molecular structure. So you go from clay of one variety to clay of a second variety at 200 degrees. And by the time you get to 300, whatever, the type of changes that are occurring in the clay, it goes from slippery sheets to interlock sheets. Now at that point, your pot comes out and it doesn't go gloop, it's stuck. It's stuck because you've changed the chemical structure of the clay into type 3 and it won't unlock. So what seems to be happening is when you put the clay in the sheets that you're using and you microscopically it's powdered, pulverized. What's happening is the clay is adhering to the carbon in the molecules better than the molecules are keeping touch with the carbon, right? So it's really a competition. You see the same thing when you have a fire. You light a fire, you've added a bit of energy, but from there on, it's self-generating because the carbon in the plant will actually be attracted to the oxygen far more than it'll be attracted to the stick. And in doing so, it gives off energy. So that's how a fire works. It's simply a case of chemical attraction or competition. And that's what we're seeing here. But what we're trying to achieve is a long-term, low-energy input, right? So that, the people who are so concerned about the non-existent global warming, it's been happening up and down for thousands of years since Noah's flood. But we would like to cater for their fears as well, and show them that what we're doing here is chemistry on a high scale, a chemistry that's actually been known for ages, but only applied to high expensive things like perfumery and making oils in that regard. It works really well because it can attract the substances you're trying to get out.
All right. I think we're just about finished with the questions there. Any last questions quickly? Yes?
Sorry, I'm talking too much. To separate your clay and your oil, you might have thought of this as well. But I was thinking of, the Large Hadron Collider. They accelerate things that have a very strong bond. And because they accelerate them and then they crash them against some kind of screen, they can separate them. Why is this funny?
It's actually a very good idea. I'm just not sure we can afford a hadron collider.
I should have thought of that, Joe. Yes, we have considered all of those things, but as I said before, we are trying to get a low cost, environmentally contribution that will not require things like hadron colliders and things like that, which is not a commercial enterprise, by the way. That's a pure research.
Imagine if you had a catapult and you catapult it against a screen. I don't know if that would accelerate it enough to split it apart.
It does not. The bonding between the clay and the carbon and the oil is incredible.
Right.
And so that's why they use such high temperature steam, 500 to 1,000 degrees, and the steam itself will push in and break one off the other. So that's a very expensive process, by the way, and destructive to much of the environment in the minds of many farmers and greenies and things like that. So we're praying that the Lord will give us wisdom. As I keep telling people, God didn't need 6 days to make the universe. He didn't need time because he had the right processes, and it's the right process we're looking for. So let me finish by saying to you young students who are there, the whole issue of your occupational career is to realize that time is money. If you can save time, you can save money, and you'll get a job anywhere, but you'll need to come up with a better process, right? Now, we're made in God's image, even though sin has defaced that, but just pray for wisdom like we do. Lord, give us ideas as to how to separate this stuff out economically and at low energy, so we don't put more energy into it like a hadron collider just to get 2 grams of oil out the other end. It's been great to be with you. I look forward to seeing you for Aborigines in Australia in the next one. Joe, back to you, mate.
Thank you very much, John. Much appreciated you joining us. Thank you all very much for those who have joined us tonight, and we will see you later, John. God bless.
Okay. God bless. Bye.